In semantic keyword research, you should aim to understand the sequences in which different users perform search queries as part of their query path. Search engines receive massive quantities of data to understand how people search at scale. And so they collect and process data for how users refine their searches, what is the progression of their queries from one to another, the number of queries they conduct before settling on the result and being satisfied with that result, not returning to that search again, and how their search behavior evolves during a session. The aim here is to grasp the relationships between queries, proximity and path to result, and the sequences of queries performed in a single session, and to use that information to enhance the content that you produce. We'll go a little bit deeper into the theory and how this is done in search, and also some practical ways to get this type of data as well without being Google. Let's go through some definitions, starting with query sequence. Each search that you perform sends data to Google. If you do multiple searches in a session, Google will analyze the semantic proximity of these searches to one another, how related they are. Are you doing research on one topic, or are you doing multiple topics simultaneously? If the searches that you're doing are found to be close to one another semantically, structurally, or thematically, Google will identify this. And those queries that are semantically close are going to be entered into an established sequence. And those can be one query or some also previously entered queries as well. If the query term that you have entered appears to be unrelated to the others, the search engine may start a new sequence or discard that query altogether. It will just say, okay, they're researching 2 or 3 different topics at once. One of those are important, the others are not important. If Google detects patterns, a lot of people performing the same query sequence in a search session, they will use this information to further tie the two phrases as semantically related, and essentially later use the information to enrich the SERP in one of their tests. What they might do is they might introduce SERP features like related searches, people also ask, people also search for, people search next, as these indicate queries that are semantically related, not only in terms of topic and intent, but also in terms of session context. They might also attempt to broaden the searcher's knowledge and introduce them to semantically related terms or prompt them to discover new topics. What this does is keeps them on the search engine results page for longer, allowing Google to surface more ads and make higher revenue. For example, if you search for new iPhone camera, they might suggest things like new Samsung Galaxy camera, different but semantically related entity. Or what they might do is suggest new iPhone iOS, different attribute of the same entity. The query sequence is the series or order of different search queries through which the searcher performs a search session on a search engine. So what is a query path then? A query, as we have already established, is a component of a sequence. Queries and query sequences can be components of a query path. So the query path can be straightforward and completed in a single session containing sequential queries or non-sequential queries. Essentially, what this means is you search for a query that is related to your topic, then another one, and then the third one. That's your entire query path. You're satisfied with the results, you stop. What you also might do is have a sequence of 2 semantically related queries, followed by a random query, and then followed by another query from the first topic that you actually searched for. And what this does is essentially your query path is comprised of 3 queries related to the topic performed in a single session. A query path can contain separate queries without sequences, but it can also be completed in different search sessions. So you search, you do some research on a topic, and then some time passes and you start your research on that same topic again. Consider things like working on your dissertation, for instance. Query paths are dependent on location. This can influence the results that are shown. They are also dependent on query semantics. This can narrow or expand the results that are shown. They are dependent on user demographics and previous knowledge. This determines search pattern. Dependent on user content preference. This is highly subjective and difficult to really account for in your research. And they're also dependent on past history and session context. This determines results shown and influence search behavior as well. The query path is comprised of different search queries or query sequences that the searcher performs until they reach a point of interest or exhaust on a given topic, until they satisfy their intent in a single search session or across multiple search sessions. Let's talk about how to practically research for and implement sequential queries and query paths as part of our keyword research process. Approach number 1 is to use fuzzy matching to calculate query distance. The goal of our exercise is to run a machine learning model through our entire keyword universe, including competitor keywords as well, to understand which queries are semantically approximate to one another. And it gives you in a separate column the most similar keywords based on fuzzy matching or otherwise query distance. And it also gives you the percentage of similarity of those. So how similar they are to one another. If you have the main term home gym all-in-one equipment, that would be things like home gym climbing equipment or home gym beginner equipment or home gym cardio equipment and so forth. Having terms that are similar doesn't mean they are necessarily sequential or part of a single path, but they might be. So my suggestion to you here is to analyze those terms and potentially identify some that might be sequential. You can do this kind of analysis for your ranked keywords, your internal site searches, for your competitors' ranked keywords, and your keyword universe or otherwise opportunity terms that you would like to rank for. The second approach that I would suggest here would be to reverse engineer, starting from a Google SERP analysis on your keywords to identify where Google shows sequential SERP features and then utilize autocomplete for researching those as well. The approach here would be to scrape data from the Google SERP for a large collection of important keywords, specifically looking at SERP features like related searches, people also ask, people also search for, people search next, as these indicate queries that are semantically related in terms of topic, intent, and session context. You can do this manually. That will be very tedious and I do not recommend it. A tool like Data for SEO can help you do that at scale, both in Google Sheets and with their API. Run important keywords for your business through autocomplete after you complete this step to see the searches that Google is recommending to users that are related to their original search. Another approach here would be to do entity and n-gram analysis, so combining those two approaches together. Essentially, you have a list of entities, you have a list of attributes, variables, and so on. And what you want to see is if there are any patterns in the terms that appear with those entities. For instance, if you have entities that are important for your market, like phones, iPhone, Samsung, and so on, and all of their different attributes and variables like the phone size, the camera, the operation system, and so on, you might see that there are some trigrams like how to fix or how to resolve, plus a particular entity attribute combination. Or you might see something like a bigram, like tutorial on, and then a combination of the entity and attribute. So you can identify these, but these are two separate tasks. The one is the entity identification, and then the other is identifying semantically related bigrams, trigrams, and n-grams in general. Also conduct user research. Here I have several different things that I can recommend. The first one is doing user interviews to uncover intent pathways. You need to understand the steps that users take to reach a purchase decision, and how you might go about doing this is to interview a sample of users or clients who reflect your target audience and ask them to describe their typical search journey when they're looking for products or services like yours. Identify any reoccurring patterns in the sequence of searches that they mention. And why you might do that is because the insights from those interviews can reveal common query paths, like initial information searches evolving into specific product or brand queries, which can inform how you target keywords at different stages of the user journey. Another thing that you can do is to use surveys to discover common query paths. And this is a much more budget-friendly alternative to the first approach, essentially gathering insights on the type of questions users ask as they move through the stages of research, consideration, decision-making, and purchase. And you can ask users directly about their recent search behaviors through a process leading up to the decision. You can very easily collect this data through Google Forms. And why you might do this is because those responses can help you map out the typical query paths, revealing what search language your users are actually using to find products like yours. And another thing that you can do would be to map personas with their typical query sequences. The aim here is to associate user personas with specific query paths that represent their typical search journeys. How you might go about doing this is to pair user personas with hypothetical. For example, if you have someone that is a bargain hunter persona, they might start with affordable options for and then reference the product that they're searching for, and then move towards comparison queries like product versus product, while someone that is an early adopter or tech enthusiast might start with the latest trends in product category. And these two target personas, based on their searches and the information that you're serving to them, would require a slightly different tone of voice with regards to the content that you're serving to them, and maybe even featuring different product characteristics to actually entice them based on their personalized profile, based on the persona. And why you might do that is because persona-based query sequences can guide the creation of more targeted content, essentially. Some data points to consider whenever you're doing this research is Google Trends, chat and call transcripts with users, and also help desk or customer service transcripts. Tie the issues that you are seeing within those data sources, or maybe even common questions that you see within those data sources, with products or services. When it comes to these, I just want to highlight that on ML for SEO, there's also a template on sentiment analysis, and the template for entity analysis actually contains entity sentiment as well. So if you do have transcripts or customer service or help desk transcripts, you can identify common entities that people mention and the sentiment that they mention them with. And you can also assess overall sentiment of these transcripts as well, which can be extremely useful to get a really quick starting point on what to prioritize, essentially, and what are the really big pain points. Another approach is to use query path analysis via reverse engineering of the SERP on different social media platforms. So user searches, as we all know, are no longer linear or single platform. I'm quoting Heather Physiok here from their presentation at InOrbit, where they demonstrated a really interesting modern search path and how complex searches are nowadays. And this graph really shows nowadays searchers need a lot more information in order to complete a task, but they also have a lot more at their fingertips in terms of devices that they can engage with, and methods to search and platforms to search and content to evaluate before they actually make a decision. And another visual to help you understand why searches are a little bit more complex and you should use platforms beyond Google and incorporate those into your keyword research is that users will search on different places based on what they are trying to achieve related to their task. So whether they're seeking inspiration, whether they're searching for information, evaluating choices, or gathering and preparing or executing the job, all of these will have different platforms that will be the preferred platform for users at each stage. What the suggestion is here would be to identify target platforms that your audience uses. Then identify which social media platform serves which purpose of the user journey. For instance, for your audience, you might see that Pinterest and YouTube are top of funnel discovery and informational queries like how-to, ideas, and inspiration. Then you might see Instagram and TikTok appearing as lifestyle or product discovery, like trends, reviews, and recommendations. And then Twitter and Reddit for community engagement, discussions, and user-generated content. But bear in mind that this will vary based on your niche. From there, what you would like to do would be to build hypothetical query maps, cross-platform, cross-content, leading to your products. If we take Coachella as an event, for example, people might start their search with Coachella 2024 inspo, and they might be served a Pinterest board. After that, they might search for the best outfits of 2024, in which we have a result for Vogue and then an Instagram reel, which is presenting opportunities for a different content type, but also for a backlink. Then you might see that they perform the search of Coachella 2025 outfit trends because they're gearing to go to next year's edition, where they might be faced with influencers who are thought leaders in the fashion space on TikTok or YouTube. And then finally, and this is a very simplified view, they might be ready to purchase something from your e-commerce shop or Amazon or wherever it may be. What the goal is here is to identify the formats that perform well on each platform at different stages of the user journey, and pair queries with expected content type based on what appears most commonly in the SERP. Like we mentioned, you might be pairing Pinterest with queries that contain things like inspo, ideas, DIY board, and TikTok with queries like how-to, hacks, trends, review, and so on. But bear in mind that these are just examples. They're not universally applicable to all niches. So if you do decide to go to a rule-based approach like this one, just make sure that you actually test based on a statistically important sample of keywords whether this actually applies to the search results that you are seeing and whether Google is aligned with the way that you classify queries based on platform. To take the guesswork out, my suggestion would be to do a SERP analysis for your keywords for your niche with data for SEO. Then for each keyword, tag the user desired and the most commonly served content type, like video, short, image, blog, discussion, and so on, the most commonly served content format, whether it's tutorial, infographic, testimonial, and so on, plus the platform as well. So let's conclude what we learned. Google and other search engines use sequential queries to enrich the SERP user experience, keep users on the search engine result page for longer in order to show more ads by prompting them to discover new information. Understanding and mapping user paths is crucial to focusing efforts on where they will have the greatest impact at making a sale and also in revenue. Utilize different approaches like entity mapping, query similarity scoring, SERP analysis, and social media landscape analysis to enrich your keyword universe with data about user preferences on content format and SERP.